So we're going to give Andrew just an opportunity to just kind of start right in, give me your bio a little bit, and I'll keep going into the waiting room and just dropping people in, Andrew. But let's get underway.
Cool. Hey everyone, I'm Andrew. So I went to NYU, graduated in 2007, and was mostly studying philosophy and psychology at the time. So you don't actually have to study screenwriting in college to be a screenwriter. As soon as I got out, I started writing. Wrote with a writing partner who's still my writing partner. Worked on a screenplay called Dying a Gunfight for about a year. Workshop the hell out of it. It started bad, got better, eventually sold it. And that got on the blacklist, which I think, I mean, you guys telling me, I think it used to mean more than it does now. It's the list of best unproduced screenplays, and it's kind of like a popularity contest in Hollywood. So like if you get on it, it's like, you're a writer who's arrived. So that got us representation. And then, over the years, we kind of got into the studio system, writing studio gigs for hire, open writing assignments. We eventually got the on-set rewrite gig for the first AntMan movie, which got us the gig to write the second AntMan movie. That's kind of our, claim to fame at the moment. And then we actually just this past year got our first screenplay, Dying a Gunfight, made. So that's our latest thing. Now I'm working on, with COVID, animation has launched to the forefront. So we have this animated Transformers prequel project that's now greenlit, and we're working on that with Josh Cooley, who directed the Toy Story 4 movie. And I'm writing a sequel to a novella called Youngblood I published on Amazon that we are going to adapt to make a movie for Amazon Studios. That's about it.
Okay, so what we want to do, guys, is we got your questions in advance, and what Andrew and I decided to do was we're going to kind of just break this up into a couple different parts. The first one is going to be a general Q&A based on some of the questions that you wrote that have to do with character development, dialogue, how much dialogue's too much, not enough. These are a lot of common questions that come with screenwriters, so Andrew and I have kind of put them into categories. If this is your question, please feel free to speak up and follow up with Andrew's answer, because again, this whole session is based on good Q&A, good feedback to make you guys better screenwriters. So the first question was, I have this short film I'm working on. Essentially, it's about a neat and tidy guy going on a blind date with a somewhat messy girl. However, this guy has a muscle spasm disorder where he's nervous and he spazzes. The date goes wrong when the girl starts playing footsies with him, causing him to kick her, making the date take a turn for the worse. How do I get more character development in that story? First of all, awesome original plot. I love when you can make good comedies like that. Anybody want to come forward and say that was yours?
Yeah, that's mine.
No wonder you're smiling, Zora.
I am not good at writing like synopsis or like things about my movies. I kind of just create them and then go from there.
Mm-hmm.
But
I don't find joy in this class.
Me
I don't
neither.
find meaning here.
Oh, we have somebody else coming in. Go ahead, just keep talking, guys.
Well, I mean, I get a lot from that synopsis, so I think you're being hard on yourself. What I mostly get from this is what happens. You have a lot of plot in there, which is good because you know kind of what the beginning, middle, and end of your project's going to be. So if you're looking for a way to get more character development, like one of the hardest things that screenwriters or any storyteller has to do is kind of do the psychological work on the characters. So you've got this guy who's, really neat and maybe sounds a little OCD. And he also has this nervous tick. So he's not just a neat guy for no reason. He's got this nervous quality to him. So you know the what, get into the why. Why is he that way? How was he raised? Or does he have a weird relationship with his parents? Does he have some trauma? And then the fact that you're running him up against this person who's kind of the opposite, get into why. What's she like? Was she raised by neat people so she recognizes that quality? in him, and so like, you remind me of my dad, or was she raised by hippies on a commune, and you know, they're coming from two completely different worlds. None of that necessarily has to enter the story per se, but if you know all that about your characters, you're going to understand why they are the way they are. But it's also going to make your life a lot easier if you have this blind date. Once they sit down at the table, they have to talk about stuff. So, you know, the stuff of a blind date is, what kind of person are you? Who are you? Where are you from? What do you do? Where'd you go to school? That kind of stuff. So that dialogue is really going to be them voicing all the stuff that you've figured out about them. And then I would say, once you have those two things figured out, think about their arcs, because at the end of the piece, you want to kind of know how they have or haven't changed. And that can go any which way. You know, maybe this guy feels bad that he's too neat or OCD, and he meets this girl who's too messy, and he's like, nope, not for me. I'm stuck in my ways and I'm going to live my life that way. And he goes off feeling empowered. Or, you know, he spills something and it's like a total freak out for him, and she's like, no big deal. And he learns something and they walk off together, and it's like, oh, he might, you know, he might relax with this person. So when you know where you're beginning them and you know where you're ending them, and the way you get there is by knowing kind of who they are, where they've been, and what they need to learn to change.
We're going to piggyback off of that one, Andrew, for the next question. This is, Zora, you might have explored this in your own writing, but how do you make sure that you're writing within your own limits?
So I guess the first thing I would say, I would caution you to not think of it that way necessarily. There's no reason why you have to have limits. People have written about, you know, space travel and, you know, the Roman Empire. I'm writing about cartoon robots. You know, it's like, I don't necessarily have experience in that. What you do is you find the humanity in those things. You know, like a good movie about cartoon robots is a movie where those cartoon robots have distinctly human qualities, and you recognize yourself in them regardless of what they look like. You know, the best space travel movies are about the human condition, and, you know, so you don't necessarily have to say, oh, I only know, you know, X, Y, and Z, so I can only write about X, Y, and Z. I don't think that's true. And I would actually say, and this is something I kind of try to remind myself all the time, is write with ego and attitude. Go into it thinking that you're a rock star, and I think your writing's better. You know, if you write timidly, it's going to be a timid story. I would say, you know, write from a point of view, especially in the first draft, where you're the best writer in the world, and then get harder on yourself when you're editing. The way that I would say write what you know does apply is when you think about the story that you're telling. You know, if you're trying to put some humanity into a world you don't know, work on humanity, you know, humanity that you recognize, the human condition that feels close to your heart. You know, if you're a young person who hasn't experienced divorce, maybe you know, a divorce melodrama is not the first thing you want to work on. But you know, everything that you're experiencing in your life can be projected into any environment. You know, it could be it could be a political drama in a world that you have no concept of, but if it's close to your heart in terms of what the humans are going through, I think that's a good place to start. And then I would say research. You know, like probably the most glaringly obvious mistake that any newcomer or amateur will make is, okay, I'm going to write about homicide detectives, but I don't know how they talk. I don't know procedure. I don't know, you know, anything about the language or the world of homicide detectives. So when you read it, it feels like someone just kind of made it up off the top of their heads. And, you know, audiences and readers are savvy. We've seen tons of homicide detective shows and movies. So if you want to tackle that world, you just have to really know the language.
All right. First of all, let's everybody who's here, I just want to kind of make this more of a as realistic as we can to what the experience of Greenfield has been about for 12 years. Everybody, pop on your cameras. Let's make this a much more in-person look rather than just having Andrew talk to just a handful. Please, everybody, show yourselves a little bit. That way, Andrew can interact with you much better. Please do that. Again, pop on your cameras and let Andrew see you. Well, what we're going to do right now is Andrew and I talked about doing a little bit of FAQ stuff. Like, you guys are starting off with the process. You may have written one already, maybe two, maybe even three, or maybe even haven't even tried. And this is your first attempt at screenplay. Well, everybody starts there. And so I've asked Andrew to come up with 3 things that are basically, I didn't know these things when I first started, and I learned. So his errors, his mistakes from the beginning become wisdom. And now he wants to pass that wisdom on to you guys. So again, pop on your cameras so Andrew can see you. And he's going to tell you about the 3 things that he learned that he didn't even know he didn't know.
So I think the first thing, it's hilarious actually, because when you look back the first screenplay I ever wrote, Dying in a Gunfight, the fact that movie eventually got made is ridiculous when you look at the first draft, because I didn't know the first thing about structure. I didn't really understand the 3-act structure. I didn't really understand the purpose of character arcs. I didn't understand page length as it relates to timing. I knew next to nothing. And so what happened was the first draft was 160 pages of, just kind of all over the place drama and action. And it broke every rule without necessarily having a concept of what the rule was that I was breaking. And it was like this, complete mess of a screenplay. What's interesting, this is sort of the second thing, is that I was trying to write every movie I ever wanted to write in one movie. I was interested in the concept of cloning as from a sci-fi perspective. I was interested in the idea of obsession and stalking and that kind of thrillery concept. I was interested in the Romeo and Juliet dynamic of coming from a family that doesn't approve of your choices, your social choices in life. And I was putting all of that into one giant 160-page mess. I guess this kind of goes back to writing what you know in terms of your personal perspective, because what ultimately happened as I learned more about structure and I learned more about the story I was trying to tell, that eventually got whittled down to a 90-page story about a young guy in New York who fell in love with someone he wasn't supposed to fall in love with, which is exactly who I was and what I was doing and what I was experiencing at that time in my life when I was writing that screenplay. So I kind of, I had to work my way backwards to writing something I understood in a format that made, cinematic sense. And in case you don't know, the general wisdom, it's not always true, but the general wisdom is that it's about a minute a page. So a 90-page screenplay is an hour-and-a-half long movie. And I would say, when you are trying to get your foot in the door with a writing sample that you want to send out to get representation or what have you, length does matter. Don't ever cross over the 120-page mark. I know that's a horrible rule, but for a newcomer, time is money when it comes to film production, and people are like, oh, this person doesn't understand that I'm not going to make a 2.5-hour movie about this person's passion project. So it shows a certain level of awareness to give someone a nice tight script, a 90-page thriller, a 110-page romantic comedy. Always be very careful of the length of your story. And then I would say the third thing, once I got started, and this can apply to anyone anywhere in their career, is the first several studio gigs I took were stories I didn't love. And I did it to jumpstart the career. And there's sort of a double-edged sword there. It's kind of mixed advice here, because I would say if you want to be a professional screenwriter, particularly if you want to work for studios, and that's where most of the gigs are, you have to compromise some of the aspirations you have in terms of the stories you want to tell. It's like the old adage, one for them, one for me. Every project you work on isn't necessarily going to be your passion project. And if you want to get paid and, pay your rent or your mortgage with your screenwriting, sometimes you're going to have to take gigs that aren't your favorite. The first thing I think my second studio gig was Sabrina the Teenage Witch, which didn't get made. The show is not my project. And I think part of the reason why it didn't get made is because I just didn't have a connection to that character. I didn't love the story. So I think that you have to be judicious about the projects that you sacrifice your creative integrity on. But you do have to be prepared to do that sometimes. And I've learned over the years that no matter how ridiculous the concept seems, if you can connect to it on a human level and find the character, you can get excited about writing it.
Cool. Now, again, if this was your question, the next one we're going to ask, please pop your camera on, take credit for it. This is a great one. And we're going to go down a list a little bit, Andrew, where we go to, how do you know if a story idea makes a good screenplay? What is something aspiring screenwriters shouldn't do in their writing projects? That's almost just as valuable. And what are some good screenplays that aspiring screenwriters can look to as examples? So whoever's question that was a great one. Andrew, there's a ton of unpacking going on there. Go ahead and try that one out.
Okay, so I would say that in terms of ideas that make good screenplays, some people will tell you, oh, you want to write something that's cinematic, something that needs to be told visually. But, if you look at some of the greatest movies, like Reservoir Dogs, for example, is one of my favorites. That's a story that takes place in a warehouse. And the story is excellent because it's told excellently. And I think that, in terms of the story you want to tell, if there's a story you want to tell, you can tell it in a screenplay. You can tell it cinematically. So my advice would be to make sure you understand how your story breaks down into a cinematic structure. A well-crafted screenplay tells the story well. A well-told story is going to be a fun story. So no structure inside and out. And this would kind of be my answer to what not to do. Don't go in blind. Don't sit down and be like, I want to write a story, about bank robbers who wind up in a warehouse, and then just start writing. You want to know, what the first act is. What do these guys go into the warehouse thinking? And at the end of that act, how does everything that they thought they knew change? Who are the people that enter into the story, and what do they bring to it that's different? What's the new information? What are the twists? What are people hiding? When do you reveal what they're hiding? I would literally recommend every single answer to every single possible question. And I don't know if you guys have tried this process yet, but one of the best ways to structure a screenplay is to take each scene and put it on a card. Write what the scene is, write what's happening in the scene, and write why you need the scene. Usually when I write why I need the scene, that why is what is happening for the character here. If I can't explain to you why this scene's important for the character in it, cut it, you don't need it. So when you have all those up on your wall, you can kind of see your movie scene by scene. And at that point, you're gonna start to sense whether or not you're telling it well, because the twists feel like they're in good spots and everything feels resolved. There's no kind of questions that are dangling out there without answers. There's resolutions that feel like they're coming in the right spots, and characters are changing at a pace that's engaging. So I guess the condensed answer would be, you can tell any story cinematically, but make sure that you're telling it cinematically. Make sure that you're telling it with the right kind of structure and the right kind of pacing, and the right kind of planning, and never go in blind. If you go in blind, you're going to write a 160-page mess like I did when I first tried. So some recommendations for screenplays to read. When I was first reading screenplays and getting excited about screenplays, I was reading a ton of Quentin Tarantino. I wouldn't recommend reading him to understand the rules or to understand structure, because he's a guy who knows cinema so well that he has become a master of breaking the rules. But in terms of how much energy and power a scene can have, no matter where it is, a scene like taking Glorious Bastards, for example, there's the two best scenes in that movie are shooting up and burning down a movie theater, and a bunch of people sort of sitting around quietly at a table in a subcellar bar, with the tension kind of crackling between them just in the shape of dialogue. So you have this huge action sequence, and you have this tiny scene that's based on dialogue. And because he's a master, he can pull the suspense out of both of those settings. So I would just read him, because reading him shows you how much fun it can be to write, read, and play with the craft. In terms of dialogue, there's no one better than Aaron Sorkin. I would read A Few Good Men. I would read A Social Network. Social Network's interesting, actually. There's I think the screenplay is like 160 some pages. And when he wanted, I mean, even Sorkin can't write a 160-page screenplay without getting in trouble. So the studio said, you need to cut it down. And he said, give me a chance to read it to you. I'll read the whole thing, and you'll see it'll come in under 2 hours. And he was able to do it because the way he writes dialogue is so natural and so energetic, and he doesn't overwrite sentences. He writes clipped, and it's very mathematical and very organized in terms of the point he's trying to make, that he can write these long screenplays full of dialogue, but it actually doesn't take up a lot of runtime. So it's a dialogue feast when you're reading Sorkin. The best screenplay I've ever read in terms of trying to understand how tension and suspense works on the screen is Silence of the Lambs. That screenplay knows exactly when to take you in and out of a scene, everything you need to know, everything you need to not understand to stay off balance, everything you need to learn to understand the stakes. One of the better examples I've ever read for character is Alan Ball's screenplay for American Beauty. The way that he understands his characters, I really feel like he probably could have written a novel about each of them. So I would take a look at that one. Also, amazing narration in that. If you want a masterclass in structure, I would read Memento, because what's interesting about that screenplay is that if you understand your structure inside and out, if you understand exactly what your 3-act structure is and where it's going, you should be able to pick it apart and rearrange it and tell it backwards. That's a mathematician level of expertise when it comes to structure. And then just some other ones, for comedy and comedic timing. I love anything that Apatow works on. Groundhog Day might be my favorite. And then in terms of a movie that does reveals and twists really well, a movie that paces. If you ever want to know how much do I need to tell an audience in any given moment, the screenplay that probably answers that question for you is The Sixth Sense. What can you get away with when you're hiding the ball from the audience, and how much do you have to give them? How much is fair? How much is so that you don't want to get to a twist in a movie where people are like, nah, that's not fair. I didn't have enough. So it's good to that's a perfect movie for basically like, oh, in this scene, in retrospect, because I know the twist. Fight Club's another good example for this, and so is Usual Suspects. What are these scenes giving me where when I watch it again, I'm like, oh man, I missed that. So that's a good example too.
I'll tell you, that was such an impressive list, Andrew, because you guys, I am recording this obviously, and I'm going to make sure that we post it, but you'll be able to go back through it. But that was quite a list. And, so through Thanksgiving and holiday break, you have a lot of good watching to do. That's a lot of great movies. So Andrew, let's go all the way down to the bottom of our list for you and I. And so we'll kind of flip it a little bit. Instead of a full feature length, a lot of these students are going to be writing a short film. So, what are some of those rules for short films? Do you need a lot of character development? How does the arc change for a short film?
So the answer is no. When you're doing a short film, you don't have to follow a lot of the rules of feature storytelling. I think of shorts. Shorts are like basically, I actually have more experience writing short stories than short films, but they're similar in the sense that they're essentially anecdotes or jokes with a punchline, or exploring one very particular what if. It can be a chapter out of a larger life. So if you want to tell the story of a One of my favorite shorts is this grocery store thief who winds up being his own worst enemy because he's a schizophrenic. But you don't understand that he's a schizophrenic until the very end. So like what could have been a really simple smash and grab job turns out to be this huge, they're on to me, the cops are coming, but it's all in his imagination. So, if you're telling a chapter out of a life that's that complicated, it helps to know what kind of guy he is. Why is he a thief? Why doesn't he know he has this mental condition? And then you can tell this little chapter in a way where it's like you start him right at the, you catch up with him when he's walking into the grocery store. We know nothing about this guy. So, it's basically a scene in the middle of the movie, and the way that, the middle of a larger movie that doesn't exist. And if you know what that larger movie might have been, that scene's going to crackle more than if you didn't. But one of my favorite shorts that I saw recently, and actually it's a great example of how a short can launch a career, because this guy is a young filmmaker out of NYU who made this short that immediately, he had meetings with everyone in town. I think he signed with CAA and 3 Arts, and he's making a feature version of his short now. But it literally begins with a kid walking through the suburbs. He sees a pool. He hops the fence. He goes to the pool. He's flirting with the idea of jumping in. He drops his glasses in, jumps into the pool after his glasses, and as soon as he's under the water, it's like this vast, endless ocean. And he's like, "What the hell? How did I get here?" And then he sees a little thing down at the bottom that's coming up toward him, and then he jumps out of the water, and it becomes this cat and mouse between this creature in this pool that looks totally normal. From above, the pool looks normal. From below, it's this bottomless ocean. And that's it. And there's no dialogue, there's no character development. The idea at the core of that is that even highly recognizable worlds like the suburbs of, an American city that we're all sort of really accustomed to and familiar with and understand the aesthetics of and take for granted, have a lot of untold dangers and lies and secrets and stuff sort of lurking beneath the surface, and that it's all kind of hiding in plain sight, and we just don't know where to look for it. That is just an idea. It's a concept you could have written a poem about, but it makes a great short story because this filmmaker found the visual concept to accompany that idea. So I think you can go, those are the sort of two opposite extremes. And I think the luxury is as long as you're in firm control of the anecdote or the joke, and you know what the punchline is, or the idea you want to explore, you don't necessarily have to worry about character development or structure.
Awesome. So yeah, let Andrew take a sip of water here because you've been spouting out some great stuff here. So I want to make this much more interactive. So what we're going to do is, again, if you want to put an idea or a question in the chat, I will then read it to Andrew on your behalf. Or if you would like to pop your camera on right now or your microphone, we're going to enter into a little more direct Q&A. Again, if you're not brave enough to pop your video on, you just want to put some stuff in the chat, feel free. But let's open it up to some questions, whether you want to pitch Andrew right now with a concept that you've been working on and want to get a little bit more tweak and clarity to it, or just some general questions about screenwriting in general. The floor is yours, everyone. No one brave enough? All right, put your stuff in the chat. Thought well, at least we get one. So let's go back. And again, it could be almost anything. Everything is,
I have a question. Sorry.
There you go. No problem, please.
Yeah, sorry if my internet's bad too. Oh man, let me find it real quick. I lost it. Okay, you were talking about like submitting. Can you still hear me?
Yeah.
I think so.
Mm-hmm.
You're talking about like submitting screenplays and stuff. Where would you do that? Like, how do you start getting into that? And do you necessarily like need schooling for that, or could you do it by yourself?
It's funny. We're living in this period of time now, I think, where a lot of people are starting to question the value of college because there's so many examples of people spending a ton of money on college and then not landing in the career they want to land in. I would say this: the nice thing about college, if you want to be in the film business, and this is if you want to be a screenwriter, a director, a producer, or agent, manager, whatever, is that there are very specific schools where people tend to go. NYU, UCLA, USC, Emory. There's a lot of great examples, and all up and down the sort of caliber and price spectrum. But the people that go there and are in these programs, they want to do what you want to do. And so what winds up happening is you make friends in your discipline and you come of age together. Hollywood is very generational. When I got in my early 20s, all of my executives and all of the studios that were, hiring me, paying me, giving me notes, they were all in their early to mid 30s. And all of their assistants were my age. Now, all those people are running studios and are high level agents, and they're all my associates and friends. So there's a reason, there's a reason why seasoned screenwriters have an easier time getting their stuff made. It's because you have a track record. First of all, you've made people money, so they want to give you more work. But the other thing is, I don't have to call the junior executive at AntMan. I can call the head of AntMan. And that is because I came up with them. So that, it can be a little murky in terms of where to send your stuff if you haven't kind of gotten into that circle. It's as much of a bummer as it is, and I wish there was better answers to these questions sometimes, but it is kind of a who business. But the nice thing is there are very specific places that you can go to meet those people, and then you wind up being one of those people. There are sort of less traditional ways to go about it. Screenplay contests are very real. Winning a screenplay contest matters. Getting into the screenplay programs at festivals like Sundance matters a lot. Representation is keeping an eye on those things all the time. I would say that I've seen my manager will sometimes just get an email from someone who found his email somewhere. If you get an IMDb Pro account or a Studio Systems account, those cost money, but they do have people's emails on there, and they do have people's cell phones, and it's kind of like the Wild West of just like, this person, like sometimes if I get a job where it's like I'm, Deadline.com will announce that I'm working on the film adaptation of Youngblood, and it's kind of a dystopian sci-fi story. My manager will invariably get 10 emails from writers who are like, I've got a sci-fi dystopian story, and I know you represent so-and-so who does that, so will you check out mine? And it sounds like you're, screaming into the void, but they do read them sometimes, and sometimes they do get back to you. And then the other thing, it's relevant because you guys are working on shorts, is there are few calling cards these days that are more valuable than a viral short. And the only thing you need to do to get one of those is make one. Write something cool, film it on your iPhone, or you could, if you're in college, just work with the equipment they give you, because they'll give you professional stuff, and put it on Vimeo, put it on YouTube. If something is really startlingly good, it'll get noticed. People will find it, and it's launched more careers probably than any other way I've mentioned.
Great one. All right. From the chat, again, feel free to put comments in the chat. A few of you have taken me up on that offer, so go ahead and put your questions, comments, pitches for a film, that kind of stuff in the chat. Good one just came in for how do you develop a group of characters rather than just one protagonist?
Well, it's kind of, you're kind of doing the same type of work, I think. first of all, ask yourself why you need a bunch of characters. Are you telling a story about a family? Are you telling a story about a group of gangsters who are pulling off a heist together? Are you telling a story about people who work together in an office setting? If once you sort of know the type of story that you want to tell, and why you want to tell it, you know the people that you need. If you take a movie like Platoon, about a group of soldiers in Vietnam, that story is about how war is not a great place for someone with a moral compass, and that humanity goes to war to die. So you have your main character, who is the sort of POV of the audience, the person with a strong moral compass, but then you have to surround them with people that tell that story. You've got the captain who is there for the right reasons and wants to lead ethically and doesn't want to be a pirate. And then you've got the guy who is a pirate who has no ethical basis for being there and just is kind of there on a power trip. And then you've got the younger guy who's kind of a psychopath and is there to kill with impunity. The point you're trying to make, so you fill the story with people that are going to help you make that point. Then you get into their personal lives. If you want to tell us, if you have a character who's a psychopath who kills with impunity, it helps to know what that person's like. It's more interesting if you're like, well, actually, they weren't from an abusive home, and they're not just like a serial killer in army fatigues. They were actually the quarterback on their football team, and no one ever told them no, and they got this huge ego, and it's dangerous. These are the character traits that you can build into a character that really help them, even if they're a minor character and they've got 10 lines, if you know that kind of thing about that character, every line counts. They can reference, oh, this cheerleader that I dated back in school, and you're like, oh, I get it. Like that person, I kind of see where this guy's coming from. I see the lens he sees life through. And then, everything on down to a show like The Office, where, if you're going to be spending time with people and you want them to be funny and bounce off each other, you need someone who's really self-serious. You need someone who is the butt of the joke and never gets the joke. You need someone who is a conspiracy theorist. You need someone who's super cynical. You need someone who's really nice and who you can root for. So, just kind of, you're making a stew or a cocktail. You're kind of just playing with ingredients and seeing which ones you can bounce off each other. Because that's the thing you always want to be thinking about is conflict. And conflict can be, whether it's life or death, or whether it's, romantic, or whether it's just, people who just don't like each other and beef in the office all the time. It's like, how can I smash these people against each other, and what makes them different and what makes them interesting when they're in a room alone? So you just play those games, it's like a puzzle that you can kind of create for yourself and sit back. And if you enjoy it, if you enjoy the work and you enjoy imagining what these people might be like and where they might be from, and just take notes and jot it down, sooner or later, you're going to have some cool pieces to play with.
All right, let's go back to the document, Andrew. There was one of the questions that came in before the session today about setup. What is the best way to set up a story? And I know that a lot of people, they get an idea, they get a concept, but when it actually comes to sitting down and planning it out, what does that setup really look like?
Well, so I think that this is one of those ones where there's not a hard and fast rule necessarily. I mean, we talked about it a little bit already with the shorts in terms of, get in late and leave early, jump into the action. Get in late and leave early is an adage that you hear a lot, where it's, you can talk about this in terms of how you set up your movie, how you set up your short, or how you even set up scenes in your story. If someone is going into a office to meet their boss to get fired, the way you set that up impacts the way that's going to feel. Do you jump into the middle of the meeting when he says you're fired, and it's the look on the guy's face, and it's that jolt that you want to give the audience of like, oh, he was expecting to get promoted, but nope, he's getting fired. And there's comedy there. That's a very specific way to get into that scene, and it has very specific results. It's the tempo of a comedy, or the sort of the surprise or the twist that the character didn't see coming because they're about to, that's the kind of thing you see in a movie where someone like thinks they're going to have the career, but instead they have to go off here and have a different type of life. Or are you telling a more contemplative story, a story about, the type of are we living with a character in a way where he's going to enter the building and get in the elevator, and the stuff he sees in the elevator is making him question whether or not he even wants to be here. And we follow him in and we go down the hall, and it's this sort of eerie, slow, methodically paced thing that sort of ends with a firing that almost felt like inevitable. Those are the same scene, but you've gotten to them in different ways. And so they feel incredibly different. And I think that there's no right way to do it. I think you just need to know how you want your audience to feel. Is the firing a delightful surprise, or is it a slow death? And the way that you get to that point will help you make the audience feel the way you want them to feel. I think for shorts, jumping into the middle of the action is a great way to go, especially if you know the action. Thief with schizophrenia concept is definitely one to keep in mind. But then, I mean, there's also more literary ways to get in. I mean, like if you're working on a feature, I think everyone in the film business will sort of unanimously agree. If they're like, what's the best intro to a movie ever? I feel like if you give everyone 5 choices, Raising Arizona is going to be one of them, because the Coen brothers are such excellent storytellers, and they write such amazing dialogue and such amazing narration, and there's so much style and tone and feeling in it. Raising Arizona has a 5-minute, maybe even longer, like 5 to 10 minute intro. It's fully narrated, that tells a full life story. And by the time it's over, you understand everything you need to know about that character, so that you can then go on a journey with them where stealing diapers gets them in a whole heap of trouble. And we're along for the ride because we know everything. It really just depends on the way you want the audience to feel. Do you want to give them a ton of balance, like Raising Arizona, like firmly situated in the story, both feet on the ground? Or do you want to do Reservoir Dogs, where we meet a bunch of guys in a diner, and the next thing we know, one of them got shot in the back of a car? That's totally off balance. Holy crap, how did I get here? So just know that the way you set it up is you are giving your audience their sense of balance. You can give them a lot, you can take it away. It should be strategic.
Okay. And again, if you're keeping track at home, this is, I think we're up to like 10 different film references that are awesome films to watch for how to construct and start a screenplay. So again, we'll post all this. You'll be able to watch this video as many times as you want, kind of like relearn these concepts. We only have a little more than 10 minutes left. So again, keep putting those questions for Andrew in the chat. And Andrew, there's 2 more on our list that we stacked here before the session. And this one always comes up, especially in the first couple film ideas that people write. How do you make sure your viewer is actually engaged in the story?
So I think something, maybe I should have added this to the list of mistakes I made. Never forget that you're doing this to tell a story, and there is like an artistic quality to it. There's stuff you want to get off your chest. There's stuff you want to say. But if you want to work in a business that spends millions of dollars on your right to say it, it is your duty to surprise and delight. There are people like Terrence Malick and Jim Jarmusch who have found a little corner of the business for themselves where they can really kind of test the audience's patience and annoy most of the people that go to the theater to see their movies. Nothing against those guys. I actually love their stuff. But if you want to be a filmmaker with a long career, it is up to you to make people around you wealthy. And the way that you do that is by entertaining. So you have to think about, okay, this isn't just what I want to say about this. I have to say it in a way that is going to make an audience feel like it's new, like it's different. And I think the key piece of advice I'd give there is audiences love to be wrong. Every single time you have an opportunity to zig instead of zag, do it. Here are 3 people. I'm pretty sure these 2 have a thing going and this person's on the outs. If I'm watching that and that's how I feel, you should make me wrong. Make it different than the way I'm expecting. There's nothing more. I mean, like if you're watching a movie in a theater, a crowded theater, or even like if you're watching TV with your friends, the biggest moments in every viewing experience are the moments where people are like, oh, like, no, I didn't see that coming. Like that can be in a romance, or it can be in a horror, or it can be the twist at the end of a crime thriller. Constantly do the thing that's unexpected. If someone seems kind, make them evil. If someone seems evil, make them kind. A great show, I think it's on Apple. I just finished it recently. Ted Lasso. Anyone watch that yet? It's worth it because it's kind of just a feel good, character-driven comedy about this high school or college football coach from the States who takes a job managing a soccer team in England that he's not qualified for. And what's great about it is that it really could just be kind of this lame comedy about a fish out of water. But every single character plays against type. You have this girl who seems like she's going to be kind of like a vapid, empty party girl, and she winds up having a ton of substance. You have this person who seems like they're going to be the villain. They turn out to be very human. Every single time, this person's going to be doing like they're working up this huge conspiracy. They're bad people, and then you're like, oh well, actually, no, they're doing it because they have this pain, and if you can, and if the people around them can recognize that pain and connect to them on it, they're actually not so bad after all. That makes a story feel original, fresh, real. If you start with a bad person who is a bad person in the middle and a bad person at the end, nothing changed, nothing surprised us. So that's, I think, the most important thing. And then I would say, when it comes to characters who are on a journey, whether it's personal or physical, make their journey as hard as possible. There's people will say break both legs. Don't break one character. Don't break the character's leg if you can break both. Don't let them hop if they should be crawling. Everything should be hard. And sometimes I think writers avoid that stuff because making it hard on the character can make it hard on the writer. If a character has to get from point A to point B and they can only crawl, you as a writer have to figure out how they do it. It's harder, but it's more exciting. It's more interesting. There's nothing more like when I'm reading a screenplay and someone's on a journey that feels easy. It's like, oh, they needed to get from point A to point B and they kind of got there, without having to go through too many obstacles. It's a bummer. And it's a bummer on the page and it's a bummer on the screen. So make things tough on your characters, give them a lot to overcome. And then lastly, we talked about it, but just the more you know about your characters, if you can write, you don't necessarily have to do this every time. I don't do it every time, but if you can write 10 pages about every character in your entire story, they will come to life and they will surprise you. So if they're surprising you, they're going to surprise your audience.
Let's go to Ant-Man and the Wasp. Being that, that's probably arguably the biggest title that you've worked on. How much pressure was placed on you to create a script that bridged so many concepts of so many other movies together, where it just had to fit? Otherwise, the Marvel universe is going to just come down on you and you hate you, because it's just not going to work out, because you need to put all those pieces together, especially when we're that late in the game in that franchise. So what that pressure feel like?
Incredibly corporate is the quick answer. When you're working at that level, it's kind of a good example of finding the joy even when you're sacrificing some of your creative your creative aspirations. Because when I took that job, I knew that I was not going to be able to go off and explore the corners of that character that I wanted to if it didn't fit a very, very specific structure. Case in point, we're coming right after the first Infinity War movie. So everyone knows when they go and watch Ant-Man and the Wasp that Thanos snapped his fingers and half the world disappeared. So how do you navigate that? we sat at a round table with a bunch of the film. The nice thing about Marvel is they sit you in a room, and we were with the Black Panther team, and we were with the Avengers team, and we were with the Ragnarok team, and everyone's kind of like, we're creating a world. It's a bit like being in a TV writer's room. We're creating a world with episodes. So where does your episode end? Where does your end? What should I put in here? Who should I sneak in there? And it eventually became clear to us that because AntMan's true north is family, because AntMan is the kind of normal small town dad of the MCU, that we couldn't tell a story that felt true to AntMan if it took place after the snap. So we told it right before the snap. And some of the tension of that is like, the audience, we're aware that the audience is like, but wait, where are we on the timeline? And then, you give them cues to show them, okay, we're before it. And you let them wait the whole movie until the, mid-credit sequence when you go and you show the snap. And that was probably the most fun I've had as a screenwriter, was sitting in the back of theaters when that movie came out, knowing what audiences were about to see in the mid-credit sequence. And he's in the quantum realm, and he's calling out, and you fade out, and you come out, and they're dust because the snap, and the crowd just went nuts. And it's because we understood that people were coming to our movie because it was an MCU movie, but everyone was thinking about the snap the whole time. You couldn't avoid it. So make them wait for that dessert, and then hit them with it when they sort of forget they're waiting. And it was I think that was a big moment.
We would absolutely agree, and unfortunately, we are out of time, Andrew. Jill was here; she was in the session. She said, "Tell Andrew he did a fantastic job." Obviously, all of us here, please show yourselves right now, and either give our little reaction clap, or to just give Mr. Bear a clap, because there's so much great information packed into 55 minutes there. That was outstanding. And so what we'll do is we'll also gather some of the questions that follow up, and Jill will share those with you as well. And then, but Andrew, thank you so much. Just tons of valuable information.
Of course, pleasure.
Yes. Any parting advice? Quick one.
Take down every idea you have a list, and get excited about one, and always have it in the queue. There's the most annoying thing writers hear is write every day. Write every day. If you write 5 pages a day, you'll have a feature-length screenplay in a couple of months. So just if you enjoy it, do it. Don't get lazy.
Very cool. All right. Thank you so much. You guys can head to your next session, and Andrew, we'll stick around. We'll wrap up here together. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.